girl. She's old enough to smoke. Here's the carbureted TV cable, and it's hooked up to the transmission right now. This is the old one, and I've got this one lined up about the same position back at the transmission, so it's clearly longer. I think this is the TPI Camaro. Well, I had to take out the cross member again. There's the old one there. So now that the bolt is out, you can usually just wiggle it and break it loose. Make sure there's no dirt around it. Blow some compressed air around it. So I should have done this while the transmission was out, but I didn't realize that the cable was too short until after I had it installed. So I'm probably going to get terrible lighting because the transmission's up in there. Oh, it came unhooked already. Lovely. There's the old one there, and there's the new one in the transmission. So there's no way between the lighting and camera angle and that I was gonna show that and get my hands in there. I think it's working. Seems to be returning. I can always make some minor adjustments if I need to, so maybe that bracket will work for the throttle, but for the transmission that's not gonna fit, and it might be close to, no, that's not right. So I have to make my own bracket according to the geometry of like a carburetor or something. So this is your throttle cable, this is kick down cable. Sort of just welded these two brackets together last night. You can probably see that there. That's where the factory 5.3 throttle cable goes. So I cut that off, put this one from the 80s on because the 80s has the kick down cable. This attaches, this is the attachment point for 80s carburetor that came with one of these 80s kickdown cables, and you'll see this shape here where it goes onto the shaft, and I wanted to emulate the length. So from the center of the shaft to the throw point, that's the throw, like the crank throw, it's 1 1/8. So I was going to emulate that. I was going to build something that comes down about 1 1/8. But check this out, this is pretty cool. This is a 2003 throttle body, and this is like a 1983 carburetor linkage off the side of a carburetor. But see how they press this on here? The shafts are always like a oval shaft, or it has flat sides on two sides, and then they press that on there. Well, this is the same thing back in the 80s. It's a square oval pressed on. And I was hoping to be 180 degrees opposite of my throttle. So my throttle's here. I was hoping to be down here, like exactly 180 degrees opposite. And if you follow this, if you follow the shape of this oval and the shape of this oval and put them together, you're going to be exactly 180 degrees opposite. That's like exactly where I want to be right there. So this is going to work out really good, I think. Well, I took the throttle body off. I got it right here in my hand, and I'm pretty confident that this is good to go. So I'm just gonna overlap those, probably clean up some of the rust a little bit for the welder, and then I think I'm just gonna weld it on there. Well, there she is. I just put some boogers on there, so I can probably clean that up later. I might actually disassemble a lot of this later and clean it up later, I don't know. But for now it's just fitment. See what fits. So last thing I did was put the power steering pump and bracket on, then the alternator. The alternator wouldn't fit like the Gen 3 alternator, so this is an older alternator from like an early 90s GM or something. Maybe late 80s, early 90s. So that's the old body style alternator. But it fits, and it fits down lower so the hood can close. Well, I put some fluid in the transmission, got the kickdown cable hooked up. I put a little bit of fluid in the power steering pump and just did a circulation loop. The transmission and power steering pump are both on a circulation loop right now, just for testing, so I can test it out. I really want to know if the computer is going to run again, because it was sitting all winter. I bypassed the security myself. I did a video on that. Maybe I'll put a link to that video in the description. So they have a security on the computer where it won't stay running if you don't have the right key and the body control module and blah blah, or HP tuners to delete. And I don't have HP tuners, I'm just doing this all with junkyard parts. So let's see if it'll start. I have not had it running this year for 2019. I don't know if the battery's up to par. I put the solar panel on earlier. I'm just gonna see if it'll start. The alternator's not gonna charge. I probably can't run it too long, I guess. I don't know if it'll run at all. Spilled some transmission fluid on the header there when I was putting transmission fluid in. So she's gonna smoke transmission fluid a little bit. Seems to be running pretty crappy. It was idling high. Sounded like it was running on about 7 cylinders. Oh! It might help if I plug in the friggin' idle air control and throttle position sensor. That might friggin' help, eh? Oh my goodness, what a moron. What the frig is this guy doing? I hope that helps, because it didn't sound too good. Wouldn't surprise me if it was running on 7 cylinders or something. I've already had to change one injector. Okay, idle air control is plugged in, throttle position is plugged in. I don't see any major issues anywhere. The belt seems to be running. The security is fine. It's running, so that's good. So I've had people asking me if the battery dies, is it still going to work, blah blah blah. The battery died over the winter. I'm quite certain it died, so seems to be good to go still. So maybe I'll charge up the battery and start it again. If I had the wire going from the alternator to the battery, it would charge. It would run and charge itself. See if it sounds better with the throttle body hooked up. I think the battery's a little bit weak too right now, and the alternator's not charging because it's not wired. I'm pretty sure it's only running on 7 cylinders. I've got the OBD2 port there, so I can probably scan it and find out if there's a misfire on any specific cylinder, or if find out what's going on there maybe. When I parked it in the fall, it was running good on all 8 cylinders. So I can only imagine not much has changed between now and then. Bird is the word. The bad news is it's not running on all 8 cylinders. The good news is if you go over your bases before you start the thing up, you might find something that you forgot, maybe. So I had to put a dipstick in this car the other day, transmission dipstick, and I kind of rigged one up there and actually had to bend it, but I unplugged this coil pack apparently, and I didn't plug it back in apparently. That makes me happy and sad at the same time. It wasn't running 100%, and I was kind of worried there for a minute. This power steering pump came from that van, the van that I used to bypass my security on the computer. So it doesn't have a reservoir, it has a separate reservoir. I'm thinking about putting the reservoir here on these 2 bolts and just put the reservoir there. Anyway, I figure there's lots of room to bring the harness over. I've had this fuse block just hanging here. I think I'm going to stack it on top of the computer and into this corner here. But I've got a short power cable that goes over to the battery, so I'm going to correct all that, and I'm going to bring this over and tidy up the wiring a little bit. Well, now that I found one of the coils was unplugged, so maybe that'll make it sound better. That's way better. She's an old girl. She's old enough to smoke. I actually spilled a little bit of transmission fluid on the exhaust, so that's probably my fault. But that makes me so much happier now that it's running on 8 cylinders. Wow, that's way better. Well, it's far from done, but the transmission is in and the accessories are on. Belt is on and it's running, and it seems to be running good now. Steering wheel turned out pretty good. I might be able to run it longer now that the belt's on it and the water pump and all that good jazz, but I still don't have the alternator charging. So the coil packs, there's 8 coil packs, and they will kill the battery pretty damn quick if you're not charging. What is that? Why does it get quiet after a minute? After a minute it gets quiet. I don't know why. This header fits way better, so I'm not spitting exhaust on the floor anymore. Or I'm not spitting exhaust on the firewall anymore. Spit fireballs down on the ground now. So finally, after the first run of 2019, got the transmission in and the accessories on, I can say that the computer bypass is still working. The engine is still running with no security, no HP tuners, no body control module, no chip in the key. None of that. One wire. There's one wire that comes from the ignition and it runs the engine. More or less. Pretty much. I figure once I get it all figured out and laid out, maybe I'll take it apart later. Maybe I'll paint the engine bay, or I did paint the block, so I might tidy it up once I get the fitment all figured out. So I think next thing I'm gonna have to do is drive shaft. A little bit of, we have to run one wire for the alternator. I've seen one guy do something similar here, and he put one bolt down to the fuel rail, so maybe that might be good. I wouldn't even need the second one here if I had one down there, but the geometry seems to be good. I can't really tell with this TV cable until I get it in gear and stuff, but it seems to be set up good.